Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everybody. It's Paula Edgar, your host of Branding Room Only, and I am super excited to have my guest today who is going to wow you with his fabulousness like he wowed me when I first met him and each time since. Introducing Chris De Santis, who is a speaker, podcaster, and author with over 38 years of experience. His new book, Why I Find You Irritating, Navigating Generational Friction at Work, is among many topics in which he is conversant. He has a BA from the University of Notre Dame, an MBA from the University of Denver, and an MA in Organizational Development from Loyola University. He lives in a quiet corner in Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. And I'm in Brooklyn, and we are going to talk. So all of my listeners, you know that we usually start with a similar set of questions, but we're going to do it a little bit different today, which I think is going to be indicative of our conversation generally, because I'm going to define personal branding, and then we're going to talk about what that means. And I think that'll help us to jump into the meat of where I want to get into. So, Chris, for me, personal branding is like your magic. It is what your skills, your experiences, the way you deliver who you are and what you've done. And like a can of Coca-Cola, it's what you can expect each time because there's consistency, because there is strategy, and it kind of all gives you the promise of the person. And when we got on, we first started talking a little bit about how that can differentiate from what your reputation is.
Right.
And so I think the difference in reputation and personal branding is that your reputation is what it is because it's what people are saying about you, right? What you've done. Your brand is that plus how you want to shape it as you go forward, right? It's the strategy of those things. What do you take from that in terms of my definition and how I laid it out? How do you
I like your definition. It clarifies for me because when I was coming on the call, I was thinking, okay, I don't know how she sees brand. And so I might be talking about one thing and she's actually referring to another. And so I didn't want to come out here and go, oh, no. But having said what you've said, what I like about it, I'd like to build on that a little bit because I was reading a very interesting book by a man named Dan McAdams. And he's a professor at Northwestern. And he sort of aligns with you in the sense that the book is called The Art and Science of Personality. And it's layered. We are layered. And his point is, or his many points, one of them is there are dispositional traits that we all possess, meaning that you are extroverted. By the way, if anyone's seen Paula present, which you should see, you will see an example of a very extroverted, I will say agreeable, conscientious individuals. These are some of the traits of dispositional traits, right? Low in neuroticism. You're not neurotic at all. At least I don't see that. And you're open to experience because you're willing to try things. So all of those things, those are your traits, right? And then there's the next layer of you, as he would call them, and as you would allude to, is what are your goals and dreams and desires? Who do you wish to be? What do you wish to do in all of that? And where it gets to you in particular, and this is the third level of this, is what is your story? What is the narrative of who you are? And he calls these layers the actor, the agent, and the author. And so where we are with this is the authoring of the story that is really the compilation of part of who we wish, the traits that we embrace, and also the desires that we have in terms of the goals we wish to set. So I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
It's the articulation of this, because my problem with branding to some degree is it has a showman's quality to it, but does it have the weight behind it? You see what I'm saying?
Yes. And I think that, first of all, I'm really glad that you explained that because, number one, I have to get that book.
It's good.
But also because, for me, a personal brand is not truly a brand unless it's authentic, unless it has the things to back it up. And so, superficial brands are not, I don't live in those places either. And I think they truly tend not to be consistent either. So it loses some of that weight. So I love that, that fleshing out. So to that end, then how would you describe yourself in the framework that you just laid out from?
What's my story?
Yeah. What is yours? Yes.
Yeah. What's my story? Well, my story is a little different than yours in the sense that my traits are not your traits. Because I've seen you in action. You got a real presence about you. I can put on presence for a little while.
Yeah.
don't ask me for more than an hour, but I could, you sort of say, what would the audience want?
Right.
So you have to give the audience what they want in terms of, they have expectations of what you're going to say, but they also have an interest in how you convey it.
Yes.
So you have to be amenable to what they respond to. And I've noticed that some of the things they respond to are energy, are joy. So in those sense, I picked up on those. Now, again, they're aligned with who I am, but they're not necessarily, my 24/7 life. But I can certainly do that. So I think part of my brand or part of the person that I am tries to reflect back to them what I believe in a way that is palatable for them to hear it.
Yep.
And so that's part of who we are. So to your point about authentic, this is the other thing about authentic is a very interesting thing. I want people to be authentic in the pro-social manner. I think we get confused here. Authentic to some people means I can behave any way I want because that's the way I behave, because that's who I am. And I said, well, you can be an asshole, but that's not who I want to be around. You see what I'm saying? So authenticity is lovely as long as you are being pro-social in terms of how you manifest it.
Absolutely. I heard a general counsel say once at a panel, authenticity is not keeping it real. It's right. It is aligning with the nuances required for the situation, to your point about being pro-social, and also being who you are, right? So
yes. Yes. Actually, there's 3 layers to what your point is. There's another book on this, but it's called Authenticity. But it wasn't a great book. But I liked what they said. There were 3 things. There was one is know yourself. You already said it already. Be yourself. You already said that already. And own yourself. Own yourself is the idea that, look, you are not perfect. You are not perfect. And so we have to own what we are, who we are, as opposed to pretend we're not something we are.
Yes. And there's some accountability in that place too.
Yeah, right.
No,
so
I love.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say I love the that kind of layering of it too, because so often the conversation on authenticity is lacking authenticity, right? It's kind of like very superficial, and you don't get into the nuances of what it actually means. And so I'm glad that our conversation is going that way.
Yeah, because I think that's so important, because you got to say, who are you? And by the way, who you are is not universal in how it will work with everyone. I mean, I accept that about myself. I don't play well in all circles, but I try to understand where I can be most helpful. And, so in that sense, I know that I'm not universally loved, but I know that I can help in certain circumstances, if that makes sense.
Yes, I modulate my communication for whom I'm interacting with. And I think
I love that phrase. That's good.
Practice. That's a best practice that everybody should employ.
I agree. Right. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, Chris, tell me, where did you grow up and how do you think that shaped who you are now?
Yeah. That's, again, I grew up in a very small town in Western Pennsylvania. So I came from a place called Sharpsville, 6,000 people. Now it's 6,120. And it's very small in the sense that it was clearly a steel town when I was there. It is no longer a steel town because steel faded. But my father was a dentist there. And so it was a nice life. A lot of cousins. I had 26 cousins. So I knew people around. I moved away when I went to school at Notre Dame. And so my life started to change rather rapidly as a consequence of that, because I would only go back for vacations after that. But at the same time, I think what it instilled in me is more of a feeling of egalitarianism, meaning that, look, there is no great differences between us. We are closer I'm pure middle class in the sense that, look, I would like everyone to be in the middle class. I'm not saying that I should take it from you if you're rich, but I would say to you that being in the middle class says, look, we all have something to say. And so in that sense, I respect that. I respect that quality. And so I'm appreciative of where I sit with that. And at the same time, I'm not grandiose in my expectations of things either. So
26 cousins.
Yeah. I love cousins.
I know that is a lot in terms of, I think, how it also maybe helped you to have to navigate amongst a lot of people, right? And different personalities too.
Well, when I was young, that was the case, but it wasn't so bad though. When children are who you are related to seem to have a natural affinity in a way. You know what I'm saying? It was so easy with my cousins, whereas school kids were not as easy. because you had cliques and all of those things, but family's family.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I guess maybe my family has more clicks than I need. Anyway, that's
Are you from a big family?
I wouldn't call us big, but I have a lot of extensions on my family, right?
Yeah. So yeah,
a lot of cousins that aren't actually cousins, but they're cousins because that's how we bring them in. So yes, there were a lot of personalities in my family. I'll put it that way.
Oh yeah. I could imagine.
So from Notre Dame, I see
Mhm.
you collected a lot of letters. I was
Well, yes. Then after Notre Dame, I went to Denver to graduate school, and that didn't take very long. And then I couldn't stay in Denver because at the time in the early 70s was during the oil embargo and the crisis, and Denver was an oil town.
Okay.
And so I couldn't stay. So I came back to Chicago. I had friends here. Notre Dame, half our graduating class always come back here.
Mhm.
I stayed with friends. I eventually started life here. In fact, being a very shy person at the time, but being funny, I lived in Old Town, which is only 2 blocks away, and so I ended up taking classes at Second City, and I became an improv guru, and eventually I ended up teaching improvisation because I like it. And I see the utility of it, and I still see the utility of it today.
That is fascinating because you may not know this, but my goal, so I do an annual goal setting session every year, intention and goal setting. And my word of the year this year is joy. And one of my goals is to take an improv class.
Oh, you'd be good. You'd be
I'm so
very good.
excited about that. That's fantastic. I love that.
Oh yeah. Where would you, where, let's see, you're in New York.
I mean,
so yeah, there would be.
There's a bunch of different places, but
There would be.
I'm thinking about this summer in Chicago of going to a class in Chicago. So I might do both.
Well, they're very fun. I've always recommended them for a couple of reasons. One is if you're particularly a young person who's new to an area, you get to meet a lot of people. It's a lot of people, and it's almost like its own community. So you end up being in an improv class, and then you have a little group, and then you're going to these clubs, and everyone watching everyone else. So that's all fun by itself. The other thing is you learn ensemble work. You learn about giving. You learn about making someone else look good. And so in that sense, this work of the ensemble, it's one of the reasons I remember years ago, Robin Williams was a performer years ago when I was a young person. He was a young person as well. And he had a bad reputation because he was not a giver. He was a taker on the stage. Brilliant individual, but nobody liked to work with him because he wouldn't share the space. And so in improv, you learn to share the space because you need your team.
Yeah,
and so
yes, and.
That's why the whole yes, and thing comes in.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you'd be very... Do it.
I'm gonna. I'll report back. I'll report back how it goes.
Exactly.
I will tell you that somebody who likes control, like myself, I'm nervous about it, but I also think it'll help me to grow. And so I do have a mindset. And so, yes, and it's something I incorporated after someone taught it to me just about, they had learned it in improv, but I was like, I love that for diversity and inclusion work, for thinking about professional development. It's all not being stuck, right? It's okay. And what else? As opposed
Absolutely. And there are games you can play. The mother of improv is Viola Spolin. Viola Spolin's had a son, what's his, oh God, I can't think of his name offhand, but he's a famous director who then became one of my teachers. So she wrote the book Improv. And so it's sort of like the Bible of improvisation. So
you got all kinds of recommendations. I love this. The show notes.
I don't know about that, but yeah, it's good. If you're a teacher, it's a great book because it teaches you how to play the games with kids. But the games are the same games that adults play. So improvisation in the theater, it's called. Impro is another book by a man named John Stone.
Okay. So tell me more about your career journey.
Okay, so I eventually worked in corporations as anyone did it in the 70s. And I was I ended up in the area of training and development. So I fall into that space because it just worked for me. And but I kept getting let go because, again, training and development is the canary in the coal mine. So I hate to scare people who are in this profession, but the reality is if there is a contraction, this will be one of the first to be, because where can we cut? Well, we cut, basically we live in the future. We cut our future is what we do. But anyway, I had a number of interesting jobs. I was a director of training for the AMA. I was on the HR development group for Brunswick. So they were nice gigs. But again, after the third one, I just said that if I can get one client, I'll give this a go. And I got a client.
I love it. So that all led you to thinking about, I'm guessing, communication, connections within the space. And maybe that's what brought the generational piece out of into.
No, the generational piece came 15 years into this.
Okay.
Originally, when I came off, I had to say, what do I have on offer that they might want to buy? So in the sense that as a contract person, I knew that I didn't want a job. I wanted to have consulting work. So I had to find contracting gigs, which I fell into rather right away. My background in improvisation was very helpful. Because what I learned to do is whenever I was at an interview for one of these training gigs, I would just mimic whoever was the decision maker, not in an overt fashion.
I was like, what do you mean?
Not overtly a mimic, but if their style. I would say if they were polished or present, then I would sort of do that. If they were more of a let's ask a lot of questions, or if they were frenetic, I would quietly mimic a little bit of who they are, so that they would then think, oh, I like this guy, because I'm mirroring them. I'm mirroring, right? And so I get these nice gigs, and they eventually accumulated into enough work. Yeah. To your point, fast forward 15 years later, I'm now running a school for new consultants at one of these accounting firms in the suburbs, very big accounting firm, no longer there. And I was sort of what you'd call the headmaster, and I sort of made sure these 300 kids who came in every 3 weeks got through the program and did it well. Okay. Well, this was a great gig for a while. And then all of a sudden, these kids were bitching and moaning. And I'm going, what the heck? First, I thought it was the British, because, they bitch about everything. But it turns out it's just young people didn't like the program the way it was run. And I was a little taken back, because I'm thinking, I would never have told me that. I thought this was strange. Around the same time, I ran into an article in the HBR by Strauss and Howe. Strauss and Howe, Howe. They wrote a wonderful book called Generations, which I then read. But they had this whole thing on this generational theory that they had. Their theory was one of a cycle. There's 4 generations that keep repeating. I'm not necessarily buying into that, but I did really like the notion of difference about the young. And so at that moment is when I started reading about it. And I've read I don't read every, but I probably read 70 of these books between now and when I wrote my own. Wow. So and to your point, because this really fits the Paula, this is why you should be listening to Paula, is you say, where is your niche? Where is your niche? And so I tried to find within that my niche on the generational discussion as it relates to the workplace alone, and not in a way that indicts anybody, but recognizes first and foremost that we each have a skewed perspective of the other based on how our narrative turned us into who we are.
So the first time, Chris and I are both speakers for LCLD, Leadership Council on Leadership Diversity. And when I first saw you speak, I was like, well, first of all, before that, people were like, Chris De Santis is going to speak. I was like, who the heck is Chris De Santis? Okay, all right. And I sat there, and number one, I get excited, to your point earlier, when the presenter is excited about the stuff. And you weren't just excited, you had so much nuance about the different generations that I remember being riveted. And I will say the highest form of flattery that I can give any speaker is when I sit through the same presentation over and over again, because I love it. And I've seen you speak 3 times, and I can tell you, some people I'm like, oh, I already know what she's going to say. I don't got to go to that. This one I'm like, what is he going to say now? And so I have with me your book.
Oh, my book.
And which Why I Find You Irritating, which I just love as a title anyway. And it's fascinating. I'm not finished it yet. I actually want to get it on audiobook, because maybe a part of my Gen Xingness is I have ADHD, and the way that I navigate content is I can focus if I can read it and hear it at the same time. So oftentimes I will read out loud so that I'm actually ingesting information. But tell me, what do we have? Is it 6 generations in the workplace right now? Is that
it would be an unusual workplace to have 6. Well, first of all, that would be child labor.
I know. Okay, fine. I guess it depends on where you work. No, I'm just kidding.
It's a different country we're in now.
Okay, my bad. I'm not good at math, but whatever number it is, we have a lot of them, right?
I think it's 4. Yeah, 4 is probably the safest bet.
Okay.
Boomers, Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z. Clearly, there could be traditionalists, but they'd have to be more emeritus in their role.
Right. Yeah, they're just chilling, hanging out, and being like, yes,
exactly.
So, what are some of the traits of each of these?
Yes, it's a very large question, but I think let's because one of the things about all of this, and this is more for your listeners because you're familiar with this, is that there's perceptual differences because we see them as different than us in some way. But when we see them as different, we don't see them as better. We see them as worse. I always find that very interesting. We never say, wow, they're so much better than us. No, there's a problem with them. You see what I'm saying? And by the way, that's being said of us as well.
I know, like, because we're us-centric, right? We have to be the best, and then everybody else has to fall in line.
Exactly. So there's that thing going on. So you got to get rid of the perceptual differences, which is a big part of this, because so many people play into this notion that we are so different, and I don't agree with that. I think we are somewhat different. And I think one of the differentiating factors of who we are, one of them, is how we were raised. How we were raised plays into our narrative of who we are.
Yes.
I'm a boomer. I was raised in the world where my parents told me what to do. And that world was consistent in every aspect of my life. Now we live in a world where children are engaged in a dialogue and the parents really question what they should do with them and then move to a conclusion that they both agree upon. You see what I'm saying?
I do. And I'm like, as a parent, and I'm like, you're right.
Yes, you're doing that. I know you're doing that. I know you're doing that.
Should we take that class? Don't you want to? All of that engagement. But
it's exactly right. And by the way, I think you're giving them something that you didn't get. You're giving them the kind of attention you would have liked to have, and you would have liked to have been engaged with your parents. You know what I'm saying? In a conversations that we didn't have.
Yeah,
and you're much younger than me. You're probably like a late millennial or something like that.
I am a strong Gen X.
Oh, you're an Xer.
I'm a Gen X.
Okay.
We are the most resilient of them all.
You're the best. I think your generation is the most interesting because you are the most self-sufficient. You just figure it out. Figure it out.
Yes, we didn't have cell phones, and now we do, and we could do all the things on them. But I never thought about those strengths because it was just kind of what our experience is until you laid it out the way that you did. And it was like, oh, there's a part in your presentation where you talk about, I think it was Gen X, because I probably pay attention to that more, right?
Of course.
That we grew up with do you know where your children are? Like, right. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm traumatized. That's why I thought I would be missing.
Exactly. And your milk cartons, the milk carton. Oh, yeah, you're on a milk carton. Oh my. So, but this is, your life is, by the way, the recollection of that is scary, and I'm going to protect my child.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to let you out of my sight. You got to have a phone on you. I got to know where you are. This tracing technology that some parents use on their own kids, and the kids don't mind. Yeah. Which I find crazy.
I am some parent. That doesn't mean I'm like, I know where you are at all times. You're walking down the street, aren't you? I know, because I can see you. So anyway.
It's exactly right. But again, it's an expression of love.
Yeah. Yes.
But if they're not our kids, we blame them for not being us. You see?
Yeah.
That's the problem. If any young person listening to me, your challenge at work is they don't see you as you. They see you as younger reflections of who they were, and you're not acting like you should.
Yeah, there is a lot of conversation when I I work at a lot of law firms, and there's a lot of conversation about sort of the associates not aligning. Yeah. Right. Not getting in line in terms of what they're expected to do, and not in just the work, but even responsiveness and engagement and communication, verbally and nonverbal. And so you definitely see a lot of that. And so that's why I think that this book is so important, because it's giving you not just that perception piece, but how do you, if you know what their lens may be or what their experiences might be, then it can help you to get maybe what you want from them in a different way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. I mean, part of the challenge is this, they are not nearly as comfortable with ambiguity. You see what I'm saying? Because they have lived a life where everything has been explained. You insisted on explaining to your daughter or your anyone This is why we're doing it. This is what it's about. This is what I mean by that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
By the way, you lived without any explanation.
I know.
You lived without, and you just figured it out again. Figure it out. You see?
When I tell people that when I was 8, I used to take the subway. I used to take the subway into Manhattan.
Oh my God.
To meet my mother at the World Trade Center, and she would tell me, stand at the Sbarro's or stand inside Lerner's department store and wait for me. And I would. And there was nobody to track me. I didn't know.
Unbelievable.
But that's, and again, and I did. And so that resilience piece is really kind of instilled, because you got to figure it out as long as you learn what you need to do. And there's definitely a conversation I think that could be had based on the intersection of generations and culture, right? Like, so I come from an immigrant family from the Caribbean.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And this again this is why the narrative of who you are determines who you are, and it trumps your age group. Your age group, all that does is it contributes to the possibility of a common experience. You see what I'm saying? Because if I'm born between these ages in the United States in the middle class, I experienced these things. I saw this on TV. I did this. But when you come from a very different, another country with a different, by the way, your parents saying different things relative to the other parents.
Yes.
You've got a very different, you know what you have, the advantage you hold? The boomers like you because you think like they do, because your message is probably more aligned with the old boomer messages of you work really hard, do what you're told, you know, listen to these people, you'll move up. You see?
Yep. That's exactly right. I have said, you know, in the work that I do in consulting, particularly, I work with a lot of white male partners at law firms, and I'm like, we just connect. And maybe that
absolutely
explains maybe a lot of it. Also, I went to boarding school, so that kind of gives me a little bit of an in there too.
Oh, no, but that helps a lot too.
Yeah.
You're hitting on a couple of factors. One is, of course, you accept the hierarchical model and say, you got to do this, to get along and all that. And you also you are in the class as they are. You see what I'm saying? You know their game. You know their game. Knowing
their game. What are some of the, I think, in the last maybe 10, 15 years, there was so much, maligning of millennials.
Yes.
It was like, those millennials, they're roll your eyes and they don't blah, blah, blah. But what are some of the nuances that you see the most, I guess, in terms of workplaces? Maybe, let's take the law, because I know that well. Anything that kind of jumps out that you hear about a lot?
Well, again, with the millennials, we heard early on that they just they want a trophy for everything. They're really bad with feedback. They're so sensitive, blah, 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 blah. So, which again is not fair, because they look at through this lens of the self-esteem movement. And that, again, that was foisted upon these young people. No kid said, I need another trophy. The adult insists on giving you trophies.
Yeah.
So when you have this sort of acceptance of this, participation awards, the removal of scoring on teams, and it makes the young appear, you can't do this, you can't suck it up, as it were, you can't figure this out, which is very unfair. I think what's nuanced about the millennial is, first of all, I do think they want to play well with you. I think they're very collaborative in their desires. But they have to understand what the rules are. And this is a mistake both that we make for the millennials and now Gen Z. We don't tell them the rules. We only inform them of rules after they break them. And then it's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why didn't you come? What do you do? Why did you send me an email when you could have walked in here? Well, why didn't you tell me that was your desire? And then I would have done. Otherwise, I just do what I do. So my point in this is, we've got to start elevating some of the rules, because they are different. I'll tell you the other thing is, we come from the old model that we want to move right up to the top. And I'm not convinced in any way that the top is the sole direction. In fact, I like the Deloitte model of a lattice. In fact, some of the research is showing that I just read in The Economist, they call it I think they call it the crab model. The crab means they move across this way. Yeah, you go sideways, you try different things, because what it does, it gets you from being bored of what you're doing. You learn new things. You broaden your scope of what you know, which makes you more promotable as well. And it creates greater stickiness, because you're perceived as more conscientious relative to the organization. So those are things. So we have to design for that, but we don't design for that. We just blame the person who doesn't want to go after that.
Right. So yes, because we are living with the unsaid rules that we just know to follow. And they are like, how can I follow if I don't know what the rules, especially if they're unsafe?
I want to know how, remember, if they're children of video games, as an example, they want to know how to get to the next level.
Right, right.
And you can't just tell them, well, just work hard, work hard. Okay. And I will say this, because for the people listening at home, I believe we're in a transactional model of work. A transaction is, what can I get from you and I will give in return, the transaction between us. I came from the model of the covenant. If I work hard, there is a promise of employment or a better things for me later on. Deferred reward. Deferred reward. And I don't think these young people live in a deferred reward world.
Yeah, nor do they want to, I think. Nope. They're like, even if this is what you have, that's not what we want. When people started seeing that folks were, before the pandemic, that people were jumping from job to job in 2 years, it was like, oh, they're so flighty. But I think that's going to be more of the model that you continue to see because they want to continually be engaged. Right, yeah. Right now, you can get information at your fingertips. You don't ever have to be bored. And so if you're at a space where you're like, okay, well, I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. I'm filing TPS reports. Nobody's going to stay doing that.
No. You know what they're looking for? Because we come from a space where a job probably ran 15 to 20 years, meaning that was, and anyone who had a job under 5 or was a job hopper. They're a job hopper. Yeah. But to your point, what they're looking for in the conclusion is a narrative identity. This is what the emerging adult is experiencing. They're trying to say, who can I be? Yeah. Who can I? This is why what you do is so important, Paula. It's not just how naming who you are, but deciding what is important to you, and then what do you pursue relative to that, and then strive to find situations where that exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't. Yeah. So in the sense that you are a life coach. I hate to say life coach because I don't know if that's really, but you are helping them in their life because you're saying, what is your identity? What is it? What is the story that you tell of yourself? And what is the story you want to promote as a consequence of telling that? And that is your ticket. That's your ticket.
Yes. When I talk about the concept of branding to groups that are, different roles and responsibilities, different ages, oftentimes the question that I will get from folks who are older than me will be, what if I don't want to do anything on the internet? Like, what if I just, how do I do what you're talking about with people? Right. And that's kind of what we were just saying, right? It's like, it's where is that golden, thing that I can go get, but I don't want to use this tool. You're telling me to do that. Right. That's for them. I don't want to do that. And teaching or trying to encourage that fluency is really challenging with folks who are like, nah, I'm good. I've made it already here with what I got. How can I do what you want me to do within what I've got and what I want to do? And so, yeah.
I have a theory on that is one of the things you might add to your repertoire, which is robust, by the way, because I saw this, she was able, this is for your viewer audience. I saw what she did was she was able to take these people that were very self-conscious of saying who they were, and that made them very assertive in the span of about 45 minutes. So this is a very, very, very great trait and very great talent to do this. I think the next layer here is to say, what is your stage of life? Because that's a conversation you should have. So, for instance, some of these young people are still finding who their narrative identity is. Right. That's its own brand and saying, here's what I'm seeking. This is what I want to be better at. Right. Others have arrived at the stage of saying, okay, I've now arrived. Now, how do I announce to the world my expertise? Because I have arrived. And where do I spend that? Then there's us at the farther end of this who are just saying, look, I am known. I am known. Where do I, and so in that sense, do I need to have the same mechanisms that they need relative to where they are? Yep. So it's about what mechanisms are most appropriate to where you are in the stage of life. This is why you reduce resistance, because then you would say, well, you are known in this community, and this has maybe 1,000 people which know you. That's great. Did you want to know more than that? Or do you want to know a younger crowd? Or, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the question then becomes the breadth of knowing.
Yeah, no, I love that. One of the ways I'm like, you know what, if we always do what we've always done, we always get what we get. And people are like, fine, that's fine. I'm good with that. I'm like, okay, and if you're good with that, I'm good with that, right?
Right.
It's if you want more.
Exactly.
Then what do you
Exactly.
need to do? Yeah, no,
That's exactly right. Because I think, and by the way, I thought you were spot on with the audience and saying, where are they in their careers, and what do you need now? What do you need now?
Yeah.
Because then after they get to that, I think you would, I mean, you should revisit them over. I mean, part of you should cycle in throughout their lives. That's how I would view this.
Oh, yes. I was personal branding is a journey. It's never a destination because no matter where you are, you should be iterating and observing and realizing and goal setting as to whatever you want next. Even when you are saying you want to retire, there's a brand aspect in that. How do you want to sunset what you've been doing? And then how do you want to, communicate what you're not going to do anymore or what you want to do when you're not doing this? Like, so it's always, for me, the strategy sometimes I think sounds like it's so robust. It's really not. It's just determining what it is so that I can help you to figure out how you want to do that. So
it's interesting, Paula. You should go after, not to tell you how to, but there are programs now. There are programs at universities for retired CEOs and such that say, okay, what is your next, your next life?
Yes. Yes.
You would be so good in that environment because what you would be saying to them is, okay, I get who you want to be. Now, how do we get that out there as to who you want to know this?
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd be so good. You should go after retired.
Listen to me, university people. I'm just kidding.
Exactly. No, I'm telling you, because they need to, because they'll go on in their old models again, because again, they were successful. Yeah. And the problem with success is it breeds the assumption that I know more than I actually do. It's the illusion of knowledge.
Yeah. Yes. Success can sometimes, halt growth mindset and make it fixed because you feel like you've gotten there. And I'm always like, the worst part you can do is to say you can't learn anymore or can't do it.
Exactly. Right.
And yeah, my business tagline is engage your hustle. And it's kind of like, what else are you going to do? Not that you got to do everything all hard. It's like, what's the next thing? Never stop, never settle.
I like all that. I like that.
Fabulous. So another place in which the generations tend to be talked about differently is technology. What are some of your thoughts about that? Because I think I found that, the kind of, young folks they embrace technology and older folks don't, is really not true in full, right? There are definitely some people who are stagnant where they are and stagnant where they are in top and bottom. What do you have any reflections on sort of that technology piece when it comes to
I think one of a myth about my generation is we are technology adverse. That's not quite fair. What we will leverage tech. We will take the time to learn something if we see there's utility in learning it for what we are doing. Remember now, if you've already achieved mastery of something and somebody says, oh, you've got to go on TikTok, you're going, well, where does that fit? What is the gain here for me?
Yes.
And this is why I'm a big fan of reverse mentoring, where somebody can explain to me how it can be leveraged. And then I work through them and say, oh, I see where this might have some utility and application. So I do think, although I am concerned about the young, because we as humans are prone to social comparison. Meaning that, that's right. You compare ourselves to the other people who do what we do. Well, It's just how humans are. Yes. Now, but they're in this world where we used to be. I mean, I was in a class of 120 kids, and I wasn't the bad looking kid because that's all I knew. You know what I'm saying? Now they're in a world, there's not 120 kids in their class. There's thousands of kids on the internet who everyone interacts with. And now you're not in the top 10% necessarily in how you see what I'm saying?
Yes,
the pressure of social comparison.
I do. My daughter is a freshman in college. So yes, I do.
Right. And this drives them to artificially compare themselves or to artificially, inauthentically create who they are.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that's detrimental. I think it's especially detrimental to young women.
Yeah, I would agree. So, social media has, to your point, opened up horizons of seeing folks, and not just people who are similar to you, but people who are where you may want to be. And then the what you're striving for, realistic or not, becomes very curated. I always say social media is a curated, it's like a museum. You're only going to see what people want you to see. I'm not going to go and say I'm taking a selfie on a day I have a bad day. Like I'm not, I will do. And to that end, then you think that everybody's good day should be your everyday.
Yes, and it's not true to what's real about us.
Right, right.
This is why I would like them to embrace your strategy around creating an authentic brand as to who I am. And the beauty of that, in my book, I call this lopsidedness.
Yeah.
We are particularly good at some things, but we have to admit we need others for other things.
Oh, yes.
So it's the admission of, because by the way, the future is all teams. That's my theory. It's teams.
Yeah.
Because the work, especially in law firms or in consulting or in professional services, is complex.
Yeah.
And there is no great person. There's a great coordinator or there's a great facilitator, but there is no person that drives it all. Even Elon Musk, who positions himself as the genius of all geniuses, needs all those other people. He just doesn't credit them. He doesn't credit them.
that part.
Yes.
So the pandemic, when it happened, there were so many people who thought, how are we going to go forward? Because we can't be interacting with each other the way and then all of a sudden we were like we're doing right now. We're on video screens and surprise, surprise, work could get done even when you were at home. And that technological shift, I think, shook a lot of people to the core because it was like, but we have always done it that way. And we have to get back there. And now we're seeing that shift where people are like, you got to go back in the office. And I am I think you need to be in the office because I do feel like we need to people with each other. But I'm also I'd like to be in sweatpants and I don't necessarily need to see you all the time. And so that shift from the pandemic and then this new shift we're experiencing with AI, I think it's shaking so many things up and people, you can see the discomfort and not just folks who are older, but people who are younger as well are like, what do I do now? I'm very unsteady. Yeah.
No, going back to the hybrid workplace. It's here. We didn't collapse. And so, and I, quite frankly, I think millennials were vindicated. They had said all along, why do I need to come in at 8:30? Nothing happens till 10, right? So they were vindicated, like, see, it works. And so, but coming back to your point, knowing a person and learning is not through what somebody just says. It's 70% of what we do is through observation of others.
Yeah.
It's the observation. I'm in a meeting in a real room. I'm on a conference call. Let's say there's a conference. The client says something stupid. Nobody says the client says something stupid, but somebody rolls there to go, oh, wow. Everyone now knows that was a stupid thing. But we don't say anything, but you see it.
Yeah.
And when you see these things, these are cumulative. These little moments are cumulative. Yeah. So I think everyone does themselves a disservice for not coming in. By the way, the new young Gen Z wants to come in. They kind of like this sort of work experience. They just want to have more flexibility around it. And they want to be with somebody that is actually there for them when they are there.
Right. But like they don't want to come in the office and no one else, the people who can actually help them are not there.
Are not there. And you had mentioned one other thing after you had mentioned about the hybrid workplace and about AI. This is interesting.
Yeah.
I have a theory. AI is a level playing ground. When I say level playing ground is, you know who knows as much about AI as anybody? The youngest people in the room. They don't know any less than the more senior people. Right. In fact, they might even know something new because they've been cheating on this thing since it was available in grade school, or high school.
Yeah.
But the point being is what we're going to see in my theory is because we have a hybrid workplace, because we have more remote workers, because you are not as tethered to the firm, you will see another round of the dot-com boom where these young people will learn this technology and then start leaving in larger numbers in small groups of, and creating their own version.
Yeah. The we can be free and do this better, faster, and for more money.
Exactly. This is what and my other theory about this is firms have got to create, because if all these kids have not all of them, a lot of them have side hustles, you got to get them to surface what the side hustle is. And if it's a good one, invest in it.
Yeah. Yes. The narrow thinking and sort of the silos of your expertise is no longer realistic at all. And people, I don't think it ever really was, because people are so nuanced that, a good inclusive organization, good inclusive leaders will want that piece to thrive because it'll help people stay longer. Like if you feel invested in, if you feel cared about, you'll stay. And when you leave, at least you won't leave mad if you leave.
Right. And right. What we're not good at is we're not measuring performance. And so if we're not going to measure performance well, then we're reluctant to give people space to do what they want to do on their own, in addition to paying them. You see what I'm saying? If we're clear on the measurement of performance, then in fact, then you have the space you want, or I don't pay you as much for this, but I invest in some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about the measuring performance, it makes me think about feedback. And I had your good friend and Cubicle Confidential, Mary Average, was on.
Oh, I love Mary.
Yes. And we talked about how feedback and good feedback it's essential for people to grow.
Yes.
And so many people will tell me, Paula, I don't want to say this thing to this person because they can't hear me, or when I say right. But really what I find is that they don't want to, but they don't know how.
Yes.
They don't know how. And they want to be like, here's this red line document, take it, ingest all the things that I've imbued into it, but I don't want to tell you.
Right. Right.
Do. Yeah. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I see with those generations in the space, because you can't learn, to your point, with somebody being like, here's this thing that's different from what you gave me, without saying, this is why I made these changes. This is why.
You see, to your point, one of the problems we face is that we've become a little too tribal, in the sense that, look, I'm afraid to say anything to you that might offend you.
Yes.
So in that sense, I don't want to offend you. And so we get into this sort of disposition, like you're them, I'm me. And my point, and to your point, is, look, my gift is to make you a great lawyer, if that's what my gift is.
Yeah.
And then I tell you, here's how I would go about it. And then I should be asking you, what do you need from me to be a great lawyer? Because that's what I want. Now, I'm going to make mistakes along the way. You have to be cognizant enough to tell me in a way that I can hear it, how I have not helped you. But at the same time, you have to be willing to listen to how I want to help you, even though it will feel harsh. Yeah. And it's not about the harshness of the event. It's about we have to see where we will make mistakes so we don't make them again. You see, you have to create trust is so low in the country. In fact, the new young are the least trusting, but the most desirous of having trust. They want to trust. But how do I trust? What's the evidence of trust? Right. And that's why these conversations become so critical. It's saying to them, look, I'm here for you, but I have rules. These are how I play. Because we are an economic engine, not in that sense. So I have to conform to so I say, remove the curtain and explain everything and say, this is what it's about. And we will be imperfect to each other until we start to trust. And then we'll accept that we are imperfect.
Oh, imperfect to each other is such a perfect way, I think, of just talking about how things are right now. Everybody wants to be perfect for themselves, and it that way. But if we can understand that, number one, we are all interdependent on each other. Like,
exactly.
We can't do this without each other, whether or not we like each other or not. But that imperfection can help us to, number one, become, I call it champion apologizers. I am so good at apologizing. Ooh, I make a mistake. I'm like, guess what? I made a mistake. I'm going to learn from it and try my best not to do it again.
Yes.
If people just did that a little bit more and were really authentic in it, we would move along a lot further. We may not agree, but we would do it better. Right, we would do it better.
To your point, Paula, the people in power should be saying, well, these are the mistakes I've made to get here. Yeah. These are the failures I've had. When they say, because look, if I'm a young person and you're a big shot up there and I'm thinking, wow, I could never be that. Oh no, I've made a mistake. My world's over. We all have made mistakes. We only get to where we are because we don't make the same mistake.
That's a quotable right there. Absolutely. Do not. My financial advisor says this. She goes, you want to make different financial mistakes, not the same ones.
The same one. Exactly. Exactly.
That is fantastic. I knew that this conversation was going to go quickly, and I just didn't realize how. So number one, you are welcome to come on my podcast at any time and talk about whatever you want. But I'm going to ask you two questions that I ask everybody as we close. And one is this. With now our new shared understanding of a personal brand, what is a aspect of your brand, of the ethos of Chris, that you will never compromise on?
It's okay. Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's hard, but at the same time, I think where I would not compromise is I get asked to say things certain ways. Do you ever get asked that?
Yes.
Say,
Oh, yeah. Do I?
right? And we want to say it this way. And I will push back and say, look, I will make the point that I believe in a way that is favorable to you. But if I don't believe in the point, I will be absent of making it. Yeah. I will not condemn it. I mean, I won't say this is wrong. It will be absent so in that sense, I won't say what I don't also believe.
I love it. I mean, it's a values piece. Yeah, I get asked all the time, particularly just connecting what we just talked about, which are like the hybrid workplace. People are like, just go in and be a cheerleader for going back in the office. And I'm like, but I'm not a cheerleader for going back. I'm not going to say don't do it, but I will say that there's benefits to both and give the argument as opposed to saying you must go in 5 days a week and cartwhel to work. No,
exactly. If they want a shill, then hire a shill.
Or pay me a lot more then.
A lot more. And I'll use another name.
Right, exactly. There's a tact for me to say a little bit more than that. Just kidding. I know I could. My face will tell the difference anyway. Even if I said it, I'd be like, you don't believe me. My face is telling you. Okay. The final question I have is, branding room only is a take on the phrase standing room only.
Okay.
Because I'm clever. So.
And you are, and she is.
I want to ask you, what is the unique skill or experience about you that would have a room full of people with standing room only to experience?
Yeah, it's again, I think I tend to fall back on humor when I think I can. Yeah. But I'm also, again, because of my improvisation and the nature of who I am, I tend to be a tad spontaneous. So when I make a speech, I don't have the speech, I have the scaffolding. And so I will say, okay, this is what I want to get at. But in the moment, I might digress or I might come back and go. So I'm willing to step out and then step in, if that makes. Now, does it play 100% of the time? Not always, but it plays more than not.
That's sort of the magic. I mean, and you know what? I think you just hit the nail on the head as to why I like to watch you and done it over and over again. It's because it is not the same. There are some speakers that I've seen where I'm like, okay, I know the joke about the bird is coming up, but as opposed to, and similar to you, I have 4 pieces that I want to include, but I want the experience to be from them, from me, and what is happening at the time. So that adult learners need to feel fully heard and fairly treated, right? So that means that if I'm like the same thing to everybody, it doesn't resonate for most because I'm not actually honoring who they are.
Well, I knew that was true of you because you know how I knew it was true of you? Because when you spoke, you asked them things.
Yes.
And by the way, when they could say just anything, there was never a guarantee that they were going to answer in the manner that you wanted, but you went with the flow. And that tells you a lot about the presenter. It says, okay, this person is confident in the message they're giving. In the same way, they also want to play and recognize the needs and wants of the people in front of them. Yes. That's magic.
Yes. Well, that's a beautiful way to end our conversation. Chris, I love this. This is fantastic. As I mentioned, you are a branding room only VIP from now on. And everybody go out and tell all of your friends and that person who annoys the hell out of you at work to listen to this podcast. I will see you all next time on Branding Room Only. Bye.